The Prime Minister's former aide, Dominic Cummings, is expected to make some damning allegations against Boris Johnson and the government's handling of the pandemic when he appears in front of MPs this morning. Not long now to go, about an hour, isn't it?
Exactly right. 9:30 he's going to appear, and Mr Cummings has accused the Prime Minister of calling the virus Kung Flu. He's going to say that he had no serious plan to protect society's most vulnerable people from COVID. Well, joining us now is the Transport Secretary, Shapps. Very good morning to you. Although I wonder if it is going to be a very good morning, because Dominic Cummings was the right-hand man for the Prime Minister. You know, he was sort of the unofficial Deputy Prime Minister. He is literally going to open a can of worms in public in an hour's time and reveal the truth in the early days of lockdown and the arguments over the second lockdown. Are you worried?
Well, the truth, according to this particular advisor, actually, I think the proper and right way to address this is through a public inquiry. And we've announced a fully independent public inquiry, which will actually look at all aspects of decision making, which inevitably will have some bad things and some good things in decision making. There was no manual to deal with coronavirus. Everybody had to learn what to do to defeat this virus from scratch. So, and I think that public inquiry would be the right way to get to the heart of it.
Yeah, but the public inquiry is not coming for some time, and we need to make sure we don't make the same mistakes again, particularly as we're looking at a surge in the variant. I just wonder if you can address some of the things that he's going to claim. He's going to accuse the Prime Minister of being responsible for thousands of deaths by delaying that second lockdown when the second wave of the virus hit the UK in the winter. He's going to say that Mr Johnson argued against tough COVID curbs on the grounds that it is only killing 80-year-olds. There's part of a quote that I can't even say on air, but of course you've heard the accusation that he said, let the bodies pile high in their thousands. I mean, if the Prime Minister took that sort of a callous attitude to the pandemic, which was killing people in such great numbers, that doesn't speak well if the Prime Minister does it.
Look, we've been hearing some of these things coming from this former advisor for several weeks now. And what I'd say is, let's look at what's actually happened. Decisions that were being made back at the time that he is talking about, both in terms of lockdown. Well, he says this conversation was in October. We know that in November we had a second lockdown. We know in January we had a third lockdown. We're still coming out of that third lockdown, and having that lockdown, enabling time to get all those vaccinations in people's arms, that has saved thousands of lives. And we've ended up with, 73% of adults have had their first jab, over 44% their second jab. No other major country in the world has got to those kind of numbers. So we can see what's actually happened. I don't know we need to rely on he said, she said from the past.
We lost a huge number of people because we went late to that second lockdown. You mentioned that it was in November. It's the 21st of September that SAGE recommended having another lockdown.
Well, SAGE, just to be clear, because I will have been involved in some of those discussions, SAGE will have provided a range of different estimates and provided information to the Prime Minister, to COBRA and the rest of it, including, and people will remember, the scientific advisors coming out and saying, I think it was in September, that the figures could be 50,000 virus cases a day in October. Well, we know what happened. We locked down, not just the second time, but a third time as well. And I think it's slightly odd that somebody who was there at the time, was in charge of helping to steer a lot of these decisions, should look to make his particular representation on history, when we know this country has ended up with more vaccines available, more people vaccinated than any other equivalent. Each of us has the ability to get two COVID tests per week.
His particular
Hold on a second, because I think it's really important. We've got genome sequencing, where we sequence half the entire world's sequencing. So I urge people not to look at all of this sort of stream of consciousness that is sort of coming out via these tweets and today, and actually look at what's happened. And the way
stream
that
of consciousness, if I may, the stream of his particular representation of history, as you put it, includes allegations that the Prime Minister, during these discussions, made a racist reference, made an ageist reference, and has appeared to be rather callous in all. It builds a very negative portrait. You may think it's irrelevant because it comes from somebody who's got an axe to grind, but it still does significant damage to the image of the Prime Minister and the government, doesn't it?
As I say, I mean, I'll leave it to others to judge the reliability of the particular witness in this particular case.
Well, you defended, talking of reliability, you defended him after the Barnard Castle incident.
Yeah, I thought at the time that he was doing what he thought was right by his family, and I stand by that. I happened to be at that moment in time doing the Downing Street press conference when that story came out, announcing £1 billion of investment, I recall, for the A66. Here I am today, actually, by coincidence, actually coming on to talk about £401 million of investment for rail and infrastructure, particularly across the Pennines from Manchester, Leeds, York. So again,
and that
things which
announcement has been derailed by Dominic Cummings' appearance, hasn't it? I mean, that is the problem. Let's just have a look. You defended, Grant Shapps, you defended Dominic Cummings back then. You're now questioning his reliability. Let's just hear what the Prime Minister said about Dominic Cummings.
I've had extensive face-to-face conversations with Dominic Cummings, and I've concluded that in travelling to find the right kind of childcare, at the moment when both he and his wife were about to be incapacitated by coronavirus, and when he had no alternative, I think he followed the instincts of every father and every parent, and I do not mark him down for that. I believe that in every respect he has acted responsibly and legally and with integrity.
So he's a man who acts with integrity, or he's unreliable? Which one is it?
Well, I was going to say that was a year ago, and I've said, actually, I hadn't seen that clip before recently, but I said the same thing. I think at the time he was following his instincts. But either way, we're going to get to the bottom of all of this, aren't we? Because we're going to have a fully independent inquiry, which will look at every aspect of coronavirus. I think, you know, with hindsight, sort of Captain Hindsight, it's easy to sort of look back and say, if only X and Y. The truth is there's no manual for dealing with coronavirus. We were having to deal with an unprecedented situation in real time. And because of decisions made at that moment in time, we ended up investing in research and development, manufacturing, and getting coronavirus jabs into people's arms faster than any other major economy. But as I say, I won't be watching him in front of the Select Committee today, and I invite your audience to watch instead the Transport Select Committee, where I'll be talking about rail reform, the rail white paper that I published last week. That's something which will have an impact on millions of people's lives as they move around this country. And we are getting on with the business of government.
That is a clear message in your announcement, which you told us about twice, which is good for you. But messaging from the government on other issues is all over the place, isn't it, really, particularly about the guidance given on only essential travel to 8 areas that sort of got slipped out on the internet on Friday. Great confusion about it yesterday. And then the government decided, actually, we didn't really mean it. So why hasn't the government got its act together on getting its message out?
Yeah, first of all, I should just say there's no change in law anywhere in England, and people follow the rules in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales. And this is just guidance. It's just some advice which reminds people that if you live in an area that is suffering from a higher level of coronavirus, the basics still apply. It only spreads when people are close together. So therefore, meeting outside, keeping the distance, those things help. But I suppose what you're really saying is, you know, could it have been communicated better? I think it would be churlish of me to claim otherwise. Yes, I think it could and will be in the future. And the vaccine minister said as much yesterday. The idea was just to communicate it locally via the local health authorities. And that didn't happen as efficiently as we would have liked.
It didn't happen. It went on a government website and you didn't tell the local health authorities. As Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps...
Well, that's not... I just want to point out that's not strictly true. There were, of course, conversations with local authorities about it, local health authorities about it. But I do accept that you learn from these things and then you do them better. And I think it's the right...
So can I just get it clear, this guidance? Because I put this to Therese Coffey yesterday and we didn't get a clear answer. As Transport Secretary, and you're in charge of the green, amber and red lists, if I live in one of these 8 areas and I have booked a holiday to a green list country, perhaps I'm lucky enough to go to Iceland or to Portugal next week for half term, are you saying people can go, it's perfectly legal, or they can't go because it's essential travel only?
So the law says that you can do exactly the same things as you can do in the rest of the country, and that includes going to a green list country. The law is not different in any location in England. What we are saying, though, is just please apply common sense. Rather than getting together as a gathering indoors, outdoors is always going to be safer, and so on and so forth. But the law is absolutely clear; it doesn't change it at all. This is issuing guidance. This is really common sense. If you live in an area, Bolton, for example, at the moment has unfortunately 450 cases per 100,000, where the average in the country is very, very much lower, 10 times lower than that, more. Then of course, apply common sense.
So is it common sense? OK, let me ask a different question then. Is it common sense for me, if I live in one of those areas, to go on holiday next week to a green list country?
Well, what I'd encourage everyone to do, actually, because throughout the country, and particularly in those areas, of course, make sure you're taking a lateral flow test. You're entitled to 2 a week. Everybody is in the country. So order those up, pick them up from the pharmacy, or have them delivered to you, and take those tests. Please come forward for a jab, and the numbers have been very good and reassuring in those areas, because all the jabs work, particularly when you've had the second jab, against this particular Indian variant. Okay. There are 3 Indian variants. The one that's of concern is B16172.
But can I go on holiday, Grant Shapps?
So encouraging people to do the right things. And yes, the law is the same everywhere. I can't say this enough times, but it's just applying common sense, testing yourself perhaps more regularly than being more deliberate about the distance that you keep between people and those things. So you can test yourself twice a week. You can make sure you don't crowd into indoor places. Look, this is not for the government's sake. It's for the sake of you and your friends and loved ones, and we want people to be safe. And we'll make sure that we learn from making communications as clear as possible. But there's no change in law.
Good. I think we got there. It's legal to go on holiday.
You can go, but be careful.
But thank you very much indeed, Grant Shapps.
You're welcome.